I'm Gemma Lonsdale, psychic medium and life coach, and you're listening to the Happy Psychic podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of The Happy Psychic. I am your host, your guiding light, Gemma Lonsdale, and in this week's episode, I am joined by David E Feldman. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. So, David is the author of a number of different books. So, one of them is the Dora Ellison Mystery Series. And along the way in his journey, he has overcome drug addiction, spinal problems, hip replacements, a number of different things. And I'll let David talk about that. But all of his books really have led to him creating something where he is trying to inspire people and give people hope and try and, I suppose, reframe some of those challenges that we have in our life. But yes, it sounds like you've had quite a lot of challenges, David, to overcome yourself.
I have. Growing up, I was what we call over here someone who hung around on the other side of the tracks. That
Right.
is, I hung out with some dicey people when I was in high school, and in fact, I didn't go to high school very much, and I was a bit of a troublemaker. And that did lead me into drug addiction and, well, drug usage at first, and eventually the drugs took over. I took the drugs and the drugs took me, and that went on for quite a while until I decided I'd had enough, and I found my way to uh, to getting rid of that through spirituality.
And was it through like a spiritual practice, or was it through religion? Like, how did you end up actually coming to that stage yourself?
Yes, it was very much through spirituality and through connecting with other people who had the same issue,
Yeah.
and coming to believe in something. Um, I wasn't raised to believe in God. My family really didn't think in terms of God. It's not something that came up in my home. Um, but when I started working towards getting clean, that's something that I did connect to,
Hmm.
and I did come to believe in God, and that served me very well, and it continues to serve me well. I've had a lot of surgeries, and um, going into every surgery, one of which I had just this past December, and last year I had cancer as well, and believing in something gave me hope.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that actually. So it's funny because my family isn't religious. However, I was raised in the church and I would have went to the church, every week and participated, but I always really questioned whether there was a God. And it was only whenever I started to go down my spiritual path myself that whenever I experienced, all of the world has to really offer from a spiritual sense, it was then that I really reaffirmed for me my belief in God, this God that I had questioned for all of this time. And suddenly I was becoming so aware of there being this higher power. Have you recovered from your cancer now, or have you overcome that challenge?
So I had radiation. So I was set to have a hip replacement last April. So
Mm-hmm.
about 9 months ago, and a week before the hip replacement, one of my doctors called me and said, "Listen, you have cancer. You can't have your hip replaced." So I went forward. At that point, I changed doctors and I went to Sloan Kettering, which is one of the best cancer hospitals in the world in New York City, and I had radiation at the end of the summer. So, and then I had to postpone my hip replacement until December. So I had
Yeah.
a rather full year,
Yeah.
and I haven't had my first post radiation test yet. I'm due to have that in about 2 weeks. So, I mean, technically, my answer to your question is I don't know, but it is something. This was prostate cancer. It's something that's very treatable,
Yeah.
and I'm told that there's, nearly 100% recovery, a chance of recovery. And so I believe, believing is a big part of success. So I do believe that my doctors were successful in getting rid of the cancer, and I'll find out for sure in a few weeks.
Yeah, it's funny because I really hope, first of all, that it is positive news, and I am confident that it will be. But I had my own cancer journey actually, and that was one of the things that
Oh,
also propelled me down my spiritual path. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was just within a couple of weeks of me and my husband actually deciding to separate. So it was a bit of a, an
wow.
avalanche, really. When things just start to happen in your life, and it sort of sends you down a, I don't want to say a negative path, but there were definitely unpleasant things to have experienced. And unfortunately, my cancer did return, but I then went on to have a mastectomy to treat that. So hopefully, I am fine now. But like you, I had this hope and this belief that I will be okay, and that I will be taken care of. And um I think that it really helped me get through things a
I'm
lot.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm
And
sure.
I don't preach about manifestation. However, I do think that our thoughts attract a lot of what happens to us. And if we are positive and hoping for a good outcome, it can definitely help us through things. And also understanding that there is sometimes a purpose for us to have those experiences at the same time, because there's a lot of lessons and everything like that that we need to learn. And we always learn whenever there's more challenges there as well.
Yeah, well, wow, that's something. You had a quite a challenging time there, and I do agree that there's much that we don't fully understand about the universe, and there are people who would say, "Well, this stuff about manifestation and about God and so forth isn't very scientific." But I would respond that um, I think it is scientific because we see the results. You look at
Hmm.
the results of having hope and belief in your life, and the results of having hope and belief and connection to some kind of higher power in my life. The results are there, and I think it is scientific. In fact, I'm married for it'll be 36 years this year, to a scientist, and she believes in God, and she would say that science and nature is evidence of God.
Hmm. That's
And
actually
I
really nice to hear. Nice
I
to
think
hear.
I think she's right. To me, she is evidence of God, that this wonderful girl has been with me all these years. So I think a very helpful attitude in life, along with a belief and spirituality, is gratitude. Is being able to count our blessings, even simple things. I can see, I can hear, I know how to read, I listen to music. I'm sitting here with a dog in my lap, and having gratitude for the things we have. I have food in my refrigerator. I have a place, I have a roof over my head, clothes to wear. These things might seem very easy to take for granted, but if we stop and think about them for a minute, I think that we can see that our lives are very rich indeed.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree. And I think whenever we're able to actually show gratitude and consciously show gratitude, whether we believe in a God or the universe or, guardian angels, whatever it might be, I think whenever we extend that gratitude, it then opens the door for even more positive things to come into us. So I definitely agree there. It's funny, how you mentioned about your wife being a scientist, and she really reaffirms her belief in God through the science. And it's funny because I think that with science, there's always things that come up. If we think of Anita Murjani, I don't know if you're aware of her, but she had sort of defied the odds. She was a cancer patient, and she had a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, and her family were around her expecting her to die, and she just made a full recovery. And there are things like that that we hear about where people defy the odds against science, and I always think, well, there's so much about science even that we don't know. There's so much that science can't
Exactly.
tell us about the universe. So we can't possibly only rely on science to give us the answers, because sometimes it's proven that, not wrong. I don't want to say that it's proven wrong, but there are things that occur to defy science and to, take it in the other
That's right.
direction, and miracles and things like that. So
That's right. And you know what? My view is that many of these things really are scientific, but science hasn't caught up to them yet. I mean, the
yeah.
notion that we could create these giant steel machines that would fly through the air was ridiculous 200 years ago or 150 yeyears ago. What a silly idea. What is that, magic? What is it? But it's science. It's and science has come far enough that we are able to fly in airplanes. So I think there's many other things, spiritual connections and the nature of consciousness. Science has no idea. Scientists have no idea how consciousness works.
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, there's synapses in the brain and so forth, but really understanding what the spark of awareness is beyond science at this point. So it's very possible, and I suggest that it is the case that um, consciousness exists beyond what we're aware of, maybe between people and greater consciousness that we would talk about in terms of whether we call it God or whether we call it the Great Spirit or whatever the words we use. I think, to me, that's all spelling.
Yeah.
I interviewed my father. I've made some movies, and some years ago I made a film about the nature of consciousness, and I interviewed my father. My father's gone now, but he was a great musician. And he said, when I get upset, when your mother and I disagree and we can't seem to find our way to agreeing again, I listen to Mozart and everything changes. And to me, I think that's how he spelled God, Mozart.
Mm, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. I think from my work because I'm a psychic medium, and I wasn't always aware of my gift. I worked for a long, long time in the corporate world, completely oblivious that there was any higher power. I think I was hopeful that it was there, but really I was quite oblivious to it. I wasn't in tune with it, not to my knowledge. I wasn't using my gifts. There was times when I knew information that I probably shouldn't have known, but I put that down to me just being an intuitive person and didn't really read too much into it. But now that I have really grasped my gift and worked with it, and this is all I do all day, every day, is like deliver messages to people, work with people, I coach them. And there's just been too many wow experiences for me to be able to dismiss this higher power. When there's so much specific information that I'm able to know about a person, including illnesses, and, I have diagnosed illnesses before they've been diagnosed through, the regular doctor or with a veterinary surgeon. And my mind is just blown. Every day I'm pinching myself. It never fails to amaze me. And I just think, like, gosh, how much do we not know? How much is there out there that we don't know and that our human brains just can't compute? And as you say,
That's
consciousness
right.
is really misunderstood. And I just don't know if we'll ever really understand it actually in our human form. I just wonder if it's too much for science, too much really for what we were able to prove. But it's
Absolutely.
amazing. The miracle of life even baffles me, you
That's
know?
right. That's right. That's right. And I suspect that what we have not discovered about what's out there and what's in here and the connections between all of that is limitless. Is
Yeah.
limitless. And I try to write about these things in my books and how people cope, for myself and my characters who are real people.
Yeah.
Um, it's I find it fascinating, and I find what you're talking about, that you've discovered these gifts within yourself and the fact that you're using them to help people. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. No, yeah, I love it. It's definitely, it gives you purpose, being able to make a difference to people and to help guide people, and, even the uncovering illnesses and things like that. I just think, it's amazing to be able to do this for people.
How gratifying that must be.
Yes, it is. Sometimes it's not so much, but for the most part it is, but I'm human like everybody else, and we all have days, that are challenging, or periods in life that are challenging, or particular people that we're dealing with that are maybe a little bit more challenging, and the connection. But there's always something that we have to learn from those experiences, I think. And a better way of communicating or understanding our own triggers. So I do try to be consciously aware of those sorts of things, I would guess. That would be the best way to put it, but sometimes I am blind to things like that, like we all are, but I do attempt to, to be consciously aware of it. And I always encourage people to, always look for the lesson. If you're having a challenge or you're engaging with somebody that is particularly challenging, just try and understand what lesson it is. Is it a lesson in tolerance, or communication, or what else? What can you learn from this situation?
What can
So
we learn, and how can
yeah.
we grow?
Yeah, exactly, because it is all about growth, and my experience has been that we never really stop that growth, even when we reach the end of our life and we cross over into the afterlife, the growth continues, the learning continues. So it's like a never ending cycle of evolution, I guess, and evolving.
Right, right.
So I am very curious to understand how you ended up taking the path that you did with these books. Whenever you discuss obviously your earlier years, your drug use and everything like that, how have you ended up moving in this direction, and specifically with these types of books, which I might add, because they're like thrillers, that's actually my favorite genre. And I think the fact that you've coupled it with, these, I suppose, these lessons, or these, people overcoming challenges, and all of these different real world things that we have to deal with, and you've done that consciously. You've made a conscious decision to do that. But how did you end up getting to the stage where you thought, what, I'm going to write a series of books, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to do this? Like, how
Sure,
did that
sure,
happen?
sure. Yeah. So when I was a child, I was around a certain amount of violence. I was around people who were angry and who were in trouble and who were, arrested, and so what I did was I I came up with a character named Dora Ellison who lived with abuse as a child. She witnessed her father beating her mother, and and that caused trauma to her. And I believe that, looking back, I experienced a certain amount of trauma, so I infused her with that. And she had tried to stop as a child, her father beating her mother, and she was not able to. And so she is someone who was traumatized. She has uh, a deep well to draw from of trauma, and it comes out as rage. She solves mysteries, but early in each book she runs into a bully. She hates bullies because that's what this trauma really was. It was her father being a bully. And so she runs into people who are bullies, and she teaches them a lesson. She puts them in their place. She gives them what they deserve in every instance. And that happens on a small level early in each book. In book one, she runs into someone. She's at the supermarket. She's buying groceries, and they have I don't know if they have this where you are, but they have a 10 items or less, an express line
Yeah.
to check out. And she's on that line, and there's a young man, a teenage boy of about 15 or 16 in front of her. And in front of that young man is a big, strong uh, man with white hair and a red face, maybe 6'3", 6'4", and he has 20 items. And the boy says to the man, you have 20 items. And the man leans forward to the boy and he says, well, what are you going to do about it? And he gives the boy a hard time. And Dora's physically very strong. In book one, she begins book one as a garbage collector, and she is very strong from lifting up these garbage bins and flipping them into the back of a truck, or I guess as lorries, as they call it over there. And she witnesses this bullying that this man is doing to this boy, and she sort of reaches down and she grabs the man by his privates, and she squeezes, and the man says, never mind, it's okay. And she puts this bully in her place, and she does that in every book.
Mm-hmm.
In one book, she witnesses a dog owner beating a dog, and she gets out of the car, runs over, she teaches that bully a lesson, and she takes a dog, and that's how she gets her dog.
Yeah.
So she's someone who has been traumatized, and who is unwilling to allow other people to be traumatized, and she goes after them. And she also discovers in book one that she's physically unnatural at martial arts. She has been watching martial arts for years on TV and on social media and on apps and so forth, and she's with her lover, who is a woman, a police detective, a police lieutenant. And her lover says to her, there's a league opening up that's a mixed martial arts league. Why don't you try out for that league? And she says, oh, I don't know, that's a crazy idea, but she does. And she goes to the tryouts, and she beats everyone. She
Hmm.
seems to she's a natural. She's sort of a martial arts savant, and that plays into her becoming a detective.
That's I love those sorts of books. Like you mentioned them about Lee Child being one of your
Oh
sort
yeah,
of one of your favorites, and I really love those books as well. And then there's a smaller scale author, Steve Kavanagh. I don't know if you've heard of him, but I really enjoy his books. But he is an attorney, and his books sort of focus a bit more on like courtroom drama, but there's always
sure,
a big sort of mystery and everything, around it. And I just, it sounds like it's right up my street, the sort of books that you
good.
write.
Good.
Yeah,
I very much like Lee Child, and if you read the Jack Reacher books, Dora could be Jack Reacher's niece. She's
yeah,
someone who, very much like Jack Reacher, does not let the vulnerable people who are being pushed around and bullied um, get, she doesn't let them win. And
yeah,
Jack Reacher is very much like that. And I'm a big fan of Lee Child, and of many other authors as
yeah.
well.
And I guess the one thing would be that, those reactions to trauma aren't always the most healthiest, I guess.
That's right.
But do you have any plans for Dora to go on a bit of a healing journey, or has she been on one in any of the books and trying to overcome and deal with her trauma, or is this her therapy?
Well, it starts out as her therapy. And as she goes along, I have book 5 is coming out February 21st, which happens to be my birthday. It's called A Special Storm. And in each book, we have victims, different sorts of victims, right? Um, in book 1, we have a young couple who's making love, and the boy accidentally bangs the girl's head against the headboard, and she dies. And that's sort of the death that's at the root of the book, right? And in each book uh, there's different kinds of victims, and in some ways Dora herself is a victim, and she's a victim of her own rage. So um, in book 1, something happens to her lover Franny, this police lieutenant, and later she pairs up with someone named Missy, who's a librarian. And Missy, to take a roundabout way of answering your question, Missy is kind of a balm to her. Missy is really a kind of a healing force in her life, who um, tells her not to go quite so over the top in her response to the violence that she
Hmm.
encounters in each book. So Missy helps her, but Dora is someone, I think that a lot of us have, we see situations where unfair things happen, and maybe on some subconscious level we want to do something about it. Look, if we're trying to get, if we see a parking spot that we want on in a crowded parking lot or on a crowded street, and someone sneaks in and takes that parking space, on some level we might be upset. We might, be well adjusted enough not to do anything about it, but on some level we might be angry. And Dora kind of acts out some of our revenge fantasies.
Yeah.
So as readers, we might think, oh gee, I wish I could do this or that. And Dora does these things. So I think that's what a lot of people like. It certainly is what I like about Jack Reacher. And Dora Ellison does those sorts of things. She acts out readers' revenge fantasies. And I have had mail from readers who say, you know, this is great. I love Jack Reacher and I love Dora Ellison because she does things that I would never do.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a really interesting set of books. Now, I know that you said that book 5 is coming out on your birthday. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you've got book 5 that's coming out very soon. But it is a series of 6 books. So there is a 6th book. Is that
Well, yes, actually, in terms of it being a 6-book series right now, I have a prequel which is available for free on my website.
right?
My website's davidefeldman.com. I hope I can say that.
Yeah, yeah.
And when someone goes to my website, they can sign up and get my prequel for free.
Okay.
So that's really why it's a six book series, because
Right.
if you would look on Amazon, that's what Amazon would say, and they're counting the prequel as one of the books.
Right.
I've started to work on book 6, which would be, I know it sounds a little confusing, but it would be a 7-book series
Mhm.
with book 6 being the 7th and the prequel being the 1st, though it
Yeah.
doesn't count it that way. So I hope
Okay.
that's not too confusing for
No,
folks.
no, that's not too confusing. I definitely understood that. So, is there like an end in sight with your series, or are you set to continue
So
as long as you wish?
so I plan to continue the series ongoing. Um, Dora and Missy work for a detective agency called Geller Investigations, which is owned by a man named Adam Geller, who's a man in his 60s who is rather like myself in some ways, in that he's faced a lot of health challenges. And I plan to give him his own series. So
Okay.
he will be investigating crimes separate from Dora, and he'll have his own books. I also
Yeah.
write standalone books, and I recently wrote a book about essentially about racism, about 4 families in a town that I grew up in, Valley Stream, New York, which was an all-white town when I lived there in the 70s. And 4 families who lived there, and one of whom is the first family of color to the town, and what happens when they move in.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened when I lived there, and the family was not at first not well received, but eventually people grew to understand one another and overcame the challenges and the bigotry and so forth that was there. That book is called The Neighborhood, and it was released recently. It was
Yeah.
released in December.
Yeah. I imagine that that would be quite a sensitive subject as well um to actually write about. And there was a lady that I actually had on the podcast. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. But she actually educates people on race. She refers to it as race literacy. And I must admit, I felt quite intimidated actually interviewing her, because it made me realize that I have had such limited experience with racism and race issue. And I just felt inadequate actually in order to conduct that interview, as a white girl from, a small town in Northern Ireland where, race wasn't really a thing. It was white, we were just surrounded by white people. So I can imagine that it might be quite a sensitive subject to actually write about.
It is. It is. But you know what? One of the things that we're talking about here is hope and growth and personal growth. So I
Yeah.
suspect that your experience, while it might have been intimidating and challenging, was a growing experience for you, and
Yeah.
that you learned from it. And yes, I grew up in this town, Valley Stream, New York, and it was 100% white. There was one person of color, well, one Black person in my high school when I went to school there. And as I was writing this book, I was telling my brother Matt about it, and he said, Dave, what happened in this book actually happened at that time, and Mom did something about it. So and I didn't remember this, when in 1973 or 72, a Black family moved into my neighborhood in Southwest Valley Stream, and some people burned a cross on their lawn.
Right.
Okay, that is something that has happened in the United States here and there, and it's a violent, terrible, racist response to integration. And what my brother reminded me of is that our mother, went to the house of these new people in the neighborhood and knocked on the door and said, "My name is Enid Feldman, and I'd like you to know that you're welcome here. I'd like you to know that not everybody doesn't want you here. Some of us do
Hmm.
want you here, and you're welcome here." And it was really nice to hear that. And I don't think I was aware of this at the time. And it's very much in my book, something different happens. What happens is the grandmother, the matriarch of the family, the new family, the Black family, the Thomas family, um, says to her family, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to put our best food forward." And her son, who is a grown man, says, "You mean our best foot forward, right?" And she says, "No, our best food forward. What we're going to do is we're going to have parties, and we're going to make all our favorite dishes, and we're going to invite everyone in the neighborhood to our house to get to know us." And well, that's a bit of a bumpy road, but well, you'd have to read the book to find out what
Yeah.
happens. But I think a lot of what happens in life is that we grow up with attitudes that are born of ignorance. If someone may grow up in an all-white neighborhood, and they might have certain beliefs that they heard around the dinner table from their parents or grandparents that are born of not knowing the other people. And then you get to know the other people, and over time, you realize, well, they're just like me. They're human beings. They have hearts and souls and minds, and they have hurt feelings, and they have love, and they have, maybe some things that are not so good. And I think that really changes us and helps us grow and to become more tolerant and understanding and get along with one another. And for me, that's a big part of what life is all about.
Yeah. And I would agree, actually. I think that there's so many of our belief systems, practically all of them really, that are handed down from what we have heard, as you say, around the dinner table, from those around us, from politicians, we absorb information at an alarming rate. And we're not always able to even pinpoint where a specific belief came from. It's not always through just one thing we have heard or one thing we have taught. We have been taught, sorry. It's often just you know, all these little things built together that form this opinion or this worldview that we have. So it is good to see things like that being deconstructed a little bit. That would be a really, really interesting book, I think.
Well, I think most of what we hear from our families, that ideas and thoughts and beliefs and worldviews that are handed down from our parents and grandparents and so forth, most of that's good stuff. Most of this is held together with some kind of love, but there's also ignorance. If we're not exposed to different people, we might have certain ideas, and I think a lot of ideas come from schoolyard. Come from children not understanding other children, or seeing children who are different from the way they are, and reacting in immature ways, and and that can lead to things that are not so good, and it
Hmm.
can be challenging.
You've also wrote a book as well about how to be happy in your marriage.
I have, and I
Yeah,
am happy in my marriage.
good.
Yes, and a big part of that, I talked before about gratitude, and a big part of my happiness in my marriage comes from being grateful, really, to God and to the universe for giving me the gift of having such a wonderful bride. Um, eh, I think a lot of happiness in marriage can come from understanding that the other person is a human being, and respecting their individuality, and knowing that and accepting that we can't control our spouse or our significant other. Not that we necessarily want to try to control them, but when they behave in some way that's a little different or new to us, that we can accept and grow from and love our differences. And I think if we have some kind of connection to a greater spirituality, that our love for our significant other can be part of that spirituality.
Yeah. Exactly. And we need to flourish as individuals as well. I think, you need to be able to live your own life too and have something to bring to the table. I think, not that I'm an expert on marriage, being, divorced, but like that is an ideal view really for me, is that we both, live separate lives as well as living this life together, and we bring what's learned from external in, and sort of add it to the table, add it to the pot, and as you say, like tolerance, understanding, and all of these different things
Right.
that
Something else I think that we have to bring to the table is accountability.
mhm,
I'm not perfect. I grew up around some not very nice things, and I might have a tendency to be not just like Dora, but a little bit like Dora, in that if my feelings get hurt or if something happens that's a surprise to me, I might not react so well to it. And I have to be accountable for my behavior and my actions and my words. And if I speak in a way that's not acceptable, I have to be able to, be aware of that. And if my wife says, you shouldn't have talked to me that way, which doesn't happen very often, but once in a while, I have to be able to look at myself and look in the mirror and say, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry. I was wrong. And it's hard. And I think particularly for men in society nowadays, we're raised with the notion that, well, I'm a man. I'm right. I I have to be the one who knows and the one who controls. And I think that's not necessarily true. I've got to be able to be accountable and to be aware and to be compassionate and to be able to love. My job in my marriage is to love my wife.
yeah.
And most of the time it's very easy, but some of the time it can be rather challenging, and we have to get through those moments. Not I you know I too, like you, I'm not an expert in marriage. I have only one experience with marriage. I'm with the same girl for 37 years, and we spend a lot of our time doing different things. She loves to read magazines and newspapers on her iPad. I'm also a musician, and I spend a lot of time playing piano and singing. I perform in various venues, and so we do things that are apart, and that's great too. So I think we have a well-rounded relationship, and I think that's a good approach to marriage. At least in
Yeah.
my case, it has been.
You know what? There's so many things that I think you're talking about there in marriage that would really serve us well if we were utilizing them in the workplace and with our friendships. And I think that there's a lot, they're probably very, very relevant to marriage, but I think that actually that they could overflow into our other areas of life and serve us well.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And choosing our friends and understanding when our friends may have different beliefs than we do, for instance. I mean, here in the US, we have had a tumultuous bunch of years in terms of what's going on in the news and in our politics and in our government. And it's been very divisive, and a lot of friendships have ended over, well, did you vote for this person or did you vote for that person? Do you believe this? Do you believe that? Do you identify with this group or that group? And maintaining friendships has been somewhat challenging during this time, and in a lot of cases, what I have found is a good solution is, well, we have different politics. Let's not talk about that. Let's
Mhm.
talk about things that let's go out to dinner and have some nice food. Let's talk about our, what we have in common. Let's listen to some music. I'm in a rock band. I'm in three or four bands actually, and I find music to be a tremendously healing factor in life. Yeah, what a wonderful thing to be able to listen to music, that it brings harmony, and it can bring harmony to relationships, just like there's harmony in the music.
Mhm. Very true. I love music as well myself. I think that it has the power to dredge up the most powerful of emotions and memories, and which is all healing in itself. We have to heal it, or sorry, we have to feel it to heal it, don't we? But I do understand where you're coming from with music there. I don't perform, but I listen, and I listen a lot to music.
So do I. So do
Yeah.
I. And but when we're talking about relationships, it can be something that can be the glue that binds us. My wife and I have gone to many, many concerts. We used to follow and still kind of follow, among other people, the Grateful Dead. And so we've been to many concerts and we've enjoyed the music. And that helps us bond, not just
Hmm.
with that group, with many groups. It's been a wonderful thing for us. I think music is, I come from a family of musicians. My father was a jazz musician, and he grew up very, very poor. I'm actually writing a book based on his life now, along with book 6 of my mystery series, a book called Percival, about his name was Lawrence, but he used to tell us stories about Percival the duck. And so I'm calling the book Percival. And a lot of it is going to be about music. He grew up very, very poor in a very bad, poor section of New York City and Brooklyn called Bedford-Stuyvesant. And his mother somehow scraped together enough money to give all the kids in the family music lessons. And so they
Hmm.
all grew up to be my father was a jazz musician. He was also a concert clarinet player, and his sisters were violinists, cello players, and a pianist. And they all played music wonderfully. And so I grew up listening to a lot of music and a lot of different kinds of music. And it's been a wonderful balm and a wonderful healing thing in life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I do think actually 37 years marriage, I think that's a pretty mean feat. I think that's exceptional to, to reach that stage, when you consider the divorce rate and the amount of failed relationships that are out there. So I hope that you and your wife experience many more years of happiness together.
Well, I'd like to experience some years of good health. She's really been a sort of healing, almost nursing factor in my life, because in the last few years, I've had 7 surgeries in 4 years, and each one has been worse than the last.
Oh,
I was heading to paralysis. I was playing piano in a place called Southampton on Long Island at a steak and sushi restaurant, and I found that suddenly I couldn't use my hands correctly, and I was starting to walk like I was drunk. And I've been clean and sober for almost 30 years. And I found that I needed spinal surgery. And several days after that, I found I needed abdominal surgery 3 days later, completely unrelated.
hmm.
And then I had the hip replacements, and then I had cancer. So it's been one thing after the other. And I've kind of every now and then had to kind of look up and said, did I do something wrong, God? What's going on here? But my wife has helped me through all of it, and she's been magnificent. And the 37 years together, 36, it'll be 36 we're married, but 37 we've been together, has been really a testament to how magnificent she is.
Yeah, that's good to hear. It's, doing it for the women. Woo. It does sound like she's been an incredible support with you. And I do sympathize with you that you've had such a rough ride as well. And I have no, I can't, I don't know how hard it has been. I can only imagine, but,
May you never
hopefully,
know. May you
yeah,
never
hopefully
know how
not.
hard it is.
Hopefully not. But, fingers crossed that this is you on the up now and, headed upwards. So is it New York that you're based then? Is that where you
Yes,
are?
I live in a town called Long Beach, New York, which
Mm-hmm.
is just east of New York City,
Uh-huh.
just a little bit east of Kennedy Airport.
Yeah.
So, and it's a little barrier island, a little sliver of an island off of the south of Long Island. So I'm on Long Island, and then this little barrier island, Long Beach, New York, which is just south of Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And Long Beach was ground central for Hurricane Sandy in
Oh,
2012. This whole city was underwater. My house was underwater, and we had the office I'm sitting in now is 8 feet up in the air because our house had to be lifted because it was
right.
inundated with water. So I have an 8 foot foundation, concrete foundation under me. That's a result of Hurricane Sandy. We all had to
Mm-hmm.
have our houses completely gutted and redone since that storm.
Yeah.
But yes, it is New York. It's rather a long answer I gave you, but yes.
No, no, it's all interesting. So I know it's not New York, but my brother has just moved to New Jersey recently. So that's where he is based now. So he's
Really?
moved all the way from Ireland. Yeah.
Where in New Jersey?
Um, off the top of my head, I don't know, but
Oh,
I
okay.
know it's not that far from Manhattan when he comes to drive it. I think he said it was like a 45-minute drive or something like that to get to
I'm
Manhattan.
probably familiar with it because I went to school about an hour west of Manhattan in New Jersey, and my wife is from that area. I met her through someone I went to school with in New Jersey. So it's a very nice area, and we may yet move to New Jersey at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to
Yeah.
see. We'll have to see what the future holds, but
Yeah.
hoping for a much better future than the
Yeah.
last few years.
I am confident that it'll come for you, without doubt. I'm very, very confident that it'll come. And I'm looking forward. I'm actually going to start reading your book series because it is exactly
Oh,
the sort of book that I'm interested in.
wonderful.
So I'm looking forward to getting through those and to all of the new ones that you're going to be bringing out over the years as well.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. So how can people find you online and where can they find your books?
So my books are the Dora Ellison Mystery Series, and you can get them anywhere books are sold, at Amazon and Kobo and Google Books and Apple, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The first book is called Not Today, and
Mm-hmm.
then the rest of them are named after storms. I have a gathering storm, a special storm, a sickening storm, a biological storm, a divisive storm. And the prequel is Storm Warnings. So it's a it's titled to be a prequel. And you can also get them at a discount. I'm not sure how that would work with UK, with the pound. But you can go to davidefeldman.com
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see them there, and you'll find links to them there. Book one, by the way, is free.
Okay.
You can just get book one and read it. It costs you nothing. And the other books are $3.99. That might
Yeah.
be 3.99 quid. I don't know exactly how that translates, but they're very inexpensive.
Yeah. Probably at around the 3, 4, £5 mark, I think, roughly, just going
Yeah,
off memory of so they're going to be like a reasonably priced book. It's not going to be something super
absolutely.
expensive that's going to break the bank. Yeah, no, that's good. Well, I have really enjoyed having you on the show today. It's been a great conversation, and I think that we've covered a lot of different topics, but that's never a bad thing. I like that. I like the diversity of the conversations that I have on this show. So, yeah, I've really, really enjoyed the conversation.
It's been great fun. I'm so grateful, and thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, and I really wish you all the best in the future with your health.
Thanks so much, Jem. It's great to be here.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you're able to, please rate the show or leave feedback. It would be much appreciated. You can find me on the social channels, TikTok being the most used, by searching for Gemma Lonsdale Guru. If you'd like to book a private reading or inquire about coaching or having me speak at your event, then visit www.gemmalonsdale.guru. You can also join my development group on Facebook by searching Gemma Lonsdale Development Group.